And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? I say we're back like we never left, but we did leave for a little bit. I was on the road out of state in Nampa, Idaho, for a little wedding. So didn't get to work as much as I maybe planned on, but the show goes on and recruiting doesn't stop as the Ducks landed two new commitments over the one over the weekend and then one to start out the week, both of them in the 2024 class. So we're going to be breaking those down. But before we get into that, I'm not alone on today's show. I'm joined by my guy, Collin King, who is a writer for us, an intern over at Ducks Digest. How we doing, man? Been a minute.
Yeah, it's been quite some time, been a bit busy, but pretty good.
Right on. Glad to hear it, man. Well, Colin's also a recent grad, going to be heading to Louisville in the fall. So congrats on the grad, Colin. And then yeah, man, let's get into this. So we got a pair of commits to talk about on today's episode. You can find us on Twitter and YouTube. We're on Twitter, on my Twitter at mtorresports, and then on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Do us a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons, and then leave us a comment letting us know how you feel about Oregon football recruiting right now in the 2024 class. And then maybe throw a question our way, and we'll see if we can get to it. Maybe looking at maybe 30 or 45 minutes on today's show is kind of the goal. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there and appreciate you guys for tuning in and taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks. So we're going to break this down. Let's just start off chronologically. I feel like that's the easiest way to go. 2024 interior offensive lineman Devin Brooks announced his commitment to Oregon on Sunday. He is out of Clackamas High School, so in-state guy out of Clackamas, Oregon. He is rated a 3-star prospect on the 247 Sports Composite, 0.8793, number 619 player nationally, number 39 interior offensive lineman, and number 4 prospect in the state of Oregon. Going to throw on some highlights here while we talk about him for those of you guys that are watching. But yeah, just kind of off the top, Colin, what are you thinking about this pickup for the Ducks? He committed while he was on his OV.
Yeah, so interesting that he did commit like on his official visit. We've seen that with a few recruits the past few weeks, not saying Oregon entirely, but across the country, there's been a few that have done that. From what you're seeing on the film, it looks like he's playing a lot of right tackle, which is kind of interesting, seeing as he's being recruited as an interior offensive lineman. I don't know the measurements on his arms, but I would assume that that is a huge factor in the reasoning behind that. Another thing that you're seeing is he's a very, very good pull blocker. He gets out in front of his playmakers pretty well. Like the wide receiver screen is something that they ran a lot, and you can see it right there. Um, he uses his size pretty well, and yeah, it seems like he's got pretty good feet as well. So I think this is a pretty good pickup. Obviously, gonna have to develop, just as any O line would have to be developed. But Devin Brooks, an in-state kid, gonna be staying home.
Yeah, and I think that so a little bit more on Brooks. He's listed at 6'4", 280, 290, excuse me. And you talk about how he's a good pull blocker and has good feet, and I think that's probably a big part of the reason that he's being recruited as an interior guy. Is I think that those guys, that play guard center, you got to be able to move pretty well, get out of your stance to get out there in space. This is a solid pickup for Oregon, and I think that it was one that they needed along the offensive line as their offensive line haul kind of comes into focus a little bit more. And this was a Pac-12 recruiting battle for Brooks, through and through. It was Oregon. You had USC involved as well. And then you also had the Washington Huskies. And, just a quick note on USC. I mean, USC has been popping off on their recruiting trail here in the month of June. We all know that they landed Dakota Fields, a corner out of Gardena Serra. That was a guy that Oregon really, really wanted here. But, important to especially for these guys that are heavily considering other Pac-12 schools, important that Oregon's able to seal the deal here and get a guy that's going to be suiting up for them on Saturdays instead of some of those other schools.
Yeah, and I mean another thing that you mentioned is that their O line haul is like coming coming towards the forefront, I guess. You look at they now have Fox Crater, they have Trent Ferguson, and you obviously have now Devin Brooks, right? Um, and you're looking at some other guys just to briefly talk about. This is the first interior offensive lineman for the class, which is a definite position of need going forward. Um, and they brought in transfers, right? So they brought in one transfer on the interior offensive lineman in Angelau. Um, and it's not going to be a permanent fix. The O-line, you're still going to have to get some pressure, still going to have to get some guys in there, right? Develop them as much as you can. And the thing that also is big, like keeping the guys home, right? Keeping the best players in the state home. That is something that they're trying to prioritize, of course. Um, wasn't always done under Cristobal. Lanning's obviously trying to do that better than Cristobal did. And there's kind of an argument for whether he's the third best player, fourth best player, where he ranks. But the top two are pretty much locked up with Joey Olson and AJ Bubiano. And getting away from the O line here, but you look back at the guys that I was talking about just a second ago. Brandon Baker, right, offensive tackle. You're looking at Eddie Pierre-Louis, interior O lineman out of Florida. Um, Jaquan McCroy, he's from Alabama, I believe. He's going to be making his commitment at the end of the month. And O-line's going to be a big factor for this team. Winning the trenches is something that Oregon's always been very vocal about doing. And they did that in a big way last class with the defensive lineman haul. And they're trying to do it here with the O-line haul.
Yeah, so it's definitely an important group too, because Collin, you got to think about Alik Terry, his first full cycle back on the staff after coming over from the Minnesota Vikings to head up the group, and I think that this is also you got to talk about how it's a recruiting win for him. They're just kind of getting his legs under him again as a recruiter. I know that he was involved heavily in the Jackson Powers Johnson recruitment when he was before he was getting some of these other jobs when he was at Oregon last. So I think that this is another recruiting win for Alik Terry, whose first haul is coming together. Like you talked about, important to get those in-state guys if you think that they're capable of one day becoming contributors for your team. That Oregon isn't necessarily a top producer of college football talent, at least not at the FBS level all the time. So it's important to get those guys, every cycle or every other cycle that you think are going to develop into guys down the road for you. I like how Brooks, just to talk a little bit more about him, and then we could talk about the overall offensive line picture. I like how the pad level that Brooks plays with. He's a guy who finishes his blocks really well. Really strong upper body. I think that's something that's pretty evident on tape. And then you talk about how the interior offensive line is a priority for Oregon after bringing in Junior Angelau. I think at least 247 has Strouthur, Nishad Strouthur listed as an interior offensive lineman, but we'll see where he ultimately ends up lining up. I think he only has 1 year left. So that's important. You got to have guys that are going to be able to come in and be ready after that. And then we have some other names that you talked about there along the offensive line that the Ducks are still going after in 2024. And some really big names at that. Brandon Baker's the biggest of the bunch, number one offensive tackle in the country out of Santa Ana Mater Dei. He just took his official visit to Ohio State over the weekend. Going to be making it out to Georgia for an official visit as well. I talked to him the day he got offered by Alabama, and he said he wants to take an official visit out to Alabama as well. I still have my prediction on Brandon Baker. I think he's going to be back on campus this month in June, but he was telling me that it probably won't be for an official visit. So that's an interesting development, but important to just get him back on campus because he's been to campus so many times. Maybe they kind of view it as, hey, let's just do the OV in season when they probably still have more of these more guys that they're still going after. But Brandon Baker's a big one. Eddie Pierre-Louis out of the state of Florida is a big one. I want to say that he's another interior guy. Collin, okay. So that's good. Important to keep pushing east. And Eddie Pierre-Louis is a guy who plays with a lot of swagger. Seeing him on the offensive line circuit, if you want to say, the 5-on-5 camps, it's something that's a little bit newer. He plays with those aviators, those tinted aviators that look super cool, and the dude can move. So, and not many times you see a 6'4", 315-pound guy running sprints. And then another guy that you have to mention, Collin, you hit on a lot of big names there, is Preston Taumua out of the state of Hawaii, out of Aiea High School. He's the number 1 player in Hawaii. He's also someone that they view as an interior guy, probably Oregon's leading center candidate for center in this 24 class. And you got to make sure you're addressing center as well. Hit on all 5 of those offensive line positions, or guys that you feel comfortable can do that. And Preston Taumua put Oregon in his top 5 not too long ago. So really good haul already in the fold, that you have committed, but you got to keep working on Fox Crater with all these big schools coming after him. And then you got to close with some of these other big guys that are still on the board.
Yeah, and it's really important, for Taumua, if you're looking at center, I don't know that they landed a center. I don't believe they did, at least. The guy that they viewed at center last season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
it might have been Iapani. That's just a guess, though. I don't know. I don't know if he actually played a lot of center.
Okay, but regardless, that's something that is going to be a big need coming up soon. So maybe they view him as a guy that will come in pretty quickly and maybe play center for them. Yeah, there's still some unknowns of who is going to be starting at center for this season even, but it's likely going to be Powers Johnson, I believe, or who's their guy?
Harper.
Yeah. But I believe he's still hurt, right?
Yeah, when we're at this point in the calendar year, it's hard to say anything too definitive because they're not really going to be doing much until fall camp gets underway. But I think kind of from what I was able to gather, it was going to be pretty much throughout most of the summer until fall camp begins. So that's when we can really check back in on these injuries, and we'll be able to, ask the coaches about what's going on.
Yeah, but it's really important to make sure you get your positions, make sure you get get your guys, I guess. And that was a big thing that Lanning preached when he was talking about the last cycle, and also to close. You can't just. We've seen Oregon in the past lead for a lot of guys, right? And they didn't close. And that's a huge issue that a lot of schools, pretty much every school faces at some point. It's just how can they close on their guys that they want? How can they they can show their development, right? Their Oregon's development has been very, very good over really the past 10 years, I'd say. Most notable probably being Penei Sewell, right? But I think you point to that if you're looking at showing a recruit what sort of prestige that Oregon has the O-line.
Yeah, no, their O-line's been pretty top tier of late, and then now you're sending guys to the NFL. You see the development with guys like Alex Forsyth and Ryan Walk, and then also at the JUCO ranks with TJ Bass coming in and having a really successful career. Male Sala, Mavaila Ulu. Always pat myself on the back kind of in my head when I'm able to rattle off that name because it's not an easy one to say. But yeah, so they've been able to become a solid developer of talent, and that's important to have that track record of development and showing that you can send guys to the next level and get it done. And then there's a couple other guys that we still haven't even talked about that the Ducks are going after in 2024 along the O-line. You have Isaiah Garcia out of the state of Utah, Corner Canyon, where the Ducks found Jackson Powers Johnson in the class of 2021. He's starting to get those OVs knocked out with USC and Utah receiving official visits. He was just out in Salt Lake City over the weekend, this past weekend for a visit. So you have him. Who else do you have? We already talked about Eddie Pierre-Louis. I think there was one more guy I'm looking right now on their offer list that I'm trying to think about. I'm tiptoeing here a little bit. I don't really think that they're still that involved with Sendra Afua from O'Day in Seattle, Washington. I think they've been kind of out on him for a while. I think Eugene Brooks is a guy out of Sierra Canyon in Chatsworth. He's an interior guy, and I talked to him at the Under Armour camp in May, and I think that he was talking about taking an official out to Oregon. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But, with this commitment, with Devin Brooks now in the fold, it really seems like it's kind of helping us hone our focus in on who those big names are that are still on the board here for Oregon in 2024. But, to maybe start winding down a little bit on Brooks, I think, obviously great to keep an in-state guy home. But I also just like from the numbers standpoint, kind of where the Ducks are at right now. with their offensive line. You feel pretty good about the guys that you have in the fold. And then, now you're able to, if you're a Leak Terry and Mike Kavanaugh and the rest of the staff, Cutter Leftwich, you're really able to kind of tailor your focus on some of these top tier guys like Brandon Baker that are still on the board for you, and Preston Tamua, and then maybe even have the luxury of putting some more focus on 25. But I think that they definitely have some things to do here in the 24 class, and then like we've talked about, it sounds like Fox Crater is going to be a battle to hold on to. Until the pen meets paper.
Yeah, and that's gonna be one to watch. Pretty much the entire summer. See how many visits he is going to take. He took a bunch during the spring, and now that we're transitioning to summer. I mean, just watching when he takes his visits, as well as also when he takes his Oregon visit. I think that's gonna be very, very important to watch, because if Oregon's still looking at 2 offensive tackles in McCroy and Baker, then if they bring all those guys in, right, there's 4. Okay, and maybe you look at a potential flip. I'm not saying that means there's going to be, but you maybe look at that as also a big question for Oregon, I think, and that'll be answered somewhat, I guess. I think it's June 30th. That is McCroy's commitment. Not sure quite how I think I'd like Oregon's chances right now. I'd go ahead and go out on a limb and say that, but I think that'll really be kind of a telltale sign of what Oregon's thinking, if they just want a big group or just the top guys.
Yeah, so I think as far as offensive line recruiting, you have the guys right now, and then I have my prediction on Oregon for Brandon Baker. I'm feeling good about that, even after a strong visit to Ohio State. I just think that they've put in so much work there. He's been around the program for so long. I talked about how one of his biggest fears with this recruitment, or worries, maybe fear isn't the right word, but one of his biggest worries or concerns was kind of unique, Colin, just that he was too comfortable with the Oregon program. So it kind of made too much sense for him to follow in his brother's footsteps after he played at Oregon. But he talked about how Dan Lanning did a great job of addressing that on his last visit. I think it was for the spring game, just, saying, hey, no one's getting complacent here. We're always working. And then, for his position, like we were talking about, Oregon's become a really good developer of talent, which is a huge piece of the puzzle, certainly for him. But yeah, so you have Fox Crater as a guy you got to watch. I also have my prediction on McCroy to Oregon. Gotta continue, feeling that one out and then seeing where he ultimately ends up. But yeah, it's good for Oregon to be at this position now, because they're able to kind of have a smaller pool of guys that they want to focus on to try to get this offensive line haul in 2024 kind of wrapped up sooner than later. So I kind of see it as probably Tamua and maybe one other tackle, whether that's Baker or McCroy, or maybe both. Seeing that, I'm just kind of curious to see how their portal haul at the offensive line spot kind of impacts their numbers, because that's something that we have to figure out now. We can't just talk about who they signed in 23 and who's on their way out in 24, but there's some more guys that are maybe going to be multi-year, impact guys that they added from the portal.
I don't have much else to add. I think you kind of addressed most of it. So I don't know if you are wanting to transition to Jack Ressler, Max.
Yeah. I'm trying to think right now. There was one other small note that we can throw in here before we get to the next guy. I think one more update that we can talk about right now, just to kind of throw this one in there. Colin, I didn't tell you about this before we recorded, but Kobe Black, 5-star quarterback corner from Waco, Texas, Connolly High School. He is in Eugene, starting off a visit on Tuesday. I believe it's an unofficial trip, but I think this is a pretty big update. Just trying to keep up with all the moving pieces after Dakota Fields announced his commitment to USC. And then Xavier Brown out of Mater Dei looks like he isn't going to be visiting Oregon anymore. And I think Greg Biggins, in his interview with Brown, he had pretty much said he was down to 3 now, with Ohio State, USC, and Alabama. So Oregon kind of effectively getting cut out there. But looks like the state of Texas is going to play a big role in the future of this cornerback haul for Demetrius Martin in 24. So certainly a notable update there.
Yeah, and also on that note, talking about some other prospects, uh, Justin Williams and Elijah Rushing will be visiting, I believe it is this weekend. I know that Williams is the 16th, June 16th to 19th or 18th, and then Rushing's leaving for his visit tomorrow. So I don't know if he's staying the entire time or not, but um, that's something for sure to watch.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some of those rumblings of an official visit for Justin Williams to Oregon coming this month, which isn't that much of a surprise. But got some highlights of Kobe Black here on the screen for you guys. But talking about Texas, Justin Williams is pretty much the face of Oregon's recruiting efforts in Texas. So obviously, be pretty big. Andrew's question here, so we can talk about Williams a little bit before we get into Ressler, talking about that commitment. This is I feel like, when you talk about the most important guys still on the board for Oregon in 2024, Justin Williams is absolutely one of them, not just for the caliber of player he is, but also for the guys that the schools that Oregon finds themselves going against, Alabama and Georgia. I mean, just in your eyes, Colin, I'd be curious to get your kind of thoughts, and I'll obviously give mine. Just what landing Justin Williams would mean for Oregon and Dan Lanning here on the recruiting trail in 2024.
Yeah, so I think landing Justin Williams would be he would be an instant starter. I think the second he steps on campus, I mean, obviously he'd have to earn it, but I believe that he would have to, or he would be rather the number one linebacker, or not number one, but he would definitely be a starter right away. He's extremely fast. I mean, former safety. You look at that. I mean, he's a freak, honestly, in the best way possible. Um, and really, you look at that, and that's on the same caliber as the Noah Sewell commitment was. Or some fans might be mad at me for this, but I would say that it would be almost on the caliber of Kayvon Thibodeau, not in terms of the fact that he is in USC's backyard or anything like that, but the fact that he is extremely talented. Obviously, I don't want to say something like generational yet because we haven't seen him on the field in college, right? But a very good impact player immediately. Should be a starter immediately, especially since that linebacker core is going to be losing a little bit again. They're already pretty shallow, I'd say, in terms of how many people are there, how many bodies are there. So I don't. I mean, this is going to be a big commitment if the Ducks can get him. And I think it would have a lot of also recruiting impact in terms of Elijah Rushing. I'm trying to think just maybe some other linebackers like maybe Platt or Dylan Williams or Kamar Mathuti, who is, on a side note, underrated. But I think the entire defense would get a boost from this. Beating out your former team, right, for a huge, like a big time recruit would be huge. And it's been Oregon's top target or one of their top targets for the longest time now, and they've been the longest interested team, I'd say, in Justin Williams. One of the first offers, one of the first offers, and also visited pretty early. He's had interest in Oregon for a very long time, and hopefully that plays out in the Ducks' favor in the end.
Yeah, so we'll just a couple more notes on Justin Williams. I mean, you talked about how long they've been, involved here. That's obviously huge, but a more recent development is Sammy Brown going to Clemson. That's the top linebacker in the state of Georgia. You don't see Kirby Smart missing out on top in-state guys very often. So a lot of people think that it looks like they're really pushing, turning up the heat on Justin Williams now for their linebacker core in the 24 class. And then you have Jonah Jonier, who's also being heavily recruited. He's out of Oak Ridge as well in Conroe, Texas. He's teammates with Justin Williams. They've talked about teaming up before. Kind of looks like it was maybe happening at Oregon. It seems like Oregon's faded a little bit for Jonah Jonier, who seems like he's probably trending towards Georgia, in my opinion, after previously being forecasted to Oklahoma. I thought Oregon was in a good spot at one point. But Justin Williams would be huge because I think he's kind of that guy, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on here, and then we'll go to Ressler. I feel like landing Justin Williams would kind of have a similar recruiting statement or, recruiting value as when Oregon landed Mateo last year, Mateo Uiagalelei, because you went against Ohio State, which is arguably the best developer of defensive line talent in terms of edge rushers in recent years. And then you have USC, and Mateo was right in USC's backyard. I know they're not necessarily rated the same caliber, but I feel like that's kind of the same territory that we're looking at here in terms of just what a big recruitment win like that would mean if the Ducks are ultimately able to get Justin Williams over Georgia and Bama.
Well, so it's interesting. Not only did they miss out on Sammy Brown, as heavy speculation that their current 5 other big-time linebacker, he's actually a commit right now, DeMarcus Riddick is going to flip to Bama. It's been talked about for a little bit now. It's just been, I've been hearing more and more about it as time goes on, and it wouldn't be surprised if it happens soon. They have been getting predictions and gaining some steam on some other linebackers as well, and not just Williams. So it'd be something to watch. But again, Georgia, they are able to show how good they are at developing linebackers. And then nobody else right now has that back-to-back national championship. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be pretty huge, and that's a good note on Riddick coming out of Chilton County in Clanton, Alabama. He's the number 3 commit on Georgia's number 1 rated 2024 class. And then just on Kobe Black, again, like what I've been saying, Collin, is just, I think that Texas is really going to play a huge role in how Oregon is ultimately able to finish here in the 24 class. I don't think that they're really favorites or even major contenders really right now for Kobe Black out of Connolly in Texas, but they are in his top 11, and getting him on campus, I'm pretty certain that, not completely certain, but I'm feeling pretty good that it's an unofficial visit. So getting him to come out on his own dime is huge. And then maybe from there, you set yourself up to get an OV from him, from Kobe Black. So Texas is going to be very, very instrumental in what Oregon's ultimately able to do here in the 2024 class. But we're going to wind down that part 1 of the podcast and get into the second commitment of the day. So I'm going to try to get this spacing out just right. There might be a little bit of a gap for you for you guys that are listening here on YouTube, but another big addition as Oregon keeps their top in-state talent home with the commitment of 2024 Clackamas offensive lineman Devin Brooks. Moving on to the second commitment for Oregon in the past couple of days, 2024 Santa Ana, California modern-day wide receiver Jack Ressler announced his commitment to Oregon on Monday, choosing the Ducks from a top 5 of Arizona State, Boise State, Oregon State, and Penn State as well. A big addition for the Ducks. Junior Adams keeping things going at the wide receiver position. This was a prediction that I made a couple weeks back after Ressler visited Oregon along with Aiden Breland and Brandon Baker, but Ducks get another big name and another talented wide receiver out of a national powerhouse in modern day. Collin, let's get some of your thoughts here.
Yeah, so with Ressler, what you're going to be getting a guy that projects at slot, which is a position of need for Oregon going forward, and also going into a powerhouse again, so that you saw him go into a powerhouse at St. Francis Academy to get Michael Van Buren, who is the higher-rated QB in the class, and Ressler as well. At modern day, you have his teammates, obviously, Aiden Breland. You have also, obviously, Brandon Baker as well there. And you have some future guys like Nasir White will be there, and a few others in 2025 that will be big targets for Oregon as well. I think this is where they kind of start looking at trying to build that pipeline, modern day to Eugene. And I think that's one step for sure in that as well. But I'm not entirely sure as to how early he will see the field. I think he is a good player. He was hurt most of last year, if I recall. But he should, regardless, still be a quality player for the Ducks. And obviously the connections are proving to be pretty big there.
Yeah, so the Jack Ressler commitment was a big one for Oregon. They're now up to 4 wide receivers in the 2024 class. We can talk a little bit more about, the overall haul for Junior Adams and the Ducks at the position, Colin. But, just to get into a little bit more about Jack Ressler and his game, he's listed on the recruiting services at 5'11", I think 5'11", 195. I've seen him in person, and I frankly don't think he's that big. I'm only 6 foot, probably like 175, 180 myself. So, not trying to rag on the guy at all, but, seeing guys in person has its value in that regard. And I think with Ressler, he's not like I've kind of been getting at. He's not the most physically imposing wide receiver. Not that Oregon really has any of those in this class. And they're not huge guys. Most of them are in that 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot range. You don't have a lot of huge receivers in this class. From a physical standpoint, like, James Madison from St. Thomas Aquinas is 6'3", 190. And I think he's the biggest guy that Oregon's going after. From a physical standpoint. But I think Ressler is a pretty technically sound guy. He runs good routes, and that's how he kind of creates most of his separation, has really good, consistent hands. And, the guys and the coaches in his commitment video were, kind of comparing him to Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of just how good his hands were. Probably the best wide receiver to come out of modern day. Now he's balling out for the Detroit Lions. So that's not, a comment that they make, a comparison that they make easily, putting him in that company. That said, I do think that Ressler is a little bit more of that short to intermediate wide receiver, because he's not crazy quick, not crazy fast. You don't see him working too terribly much in the deep game, whether it's, getting that separation in the air or, taking the top off of a defense. But I think that every team and every cycle, every class kind of needs a guy that can be that consistent, reliable pass catcher. And he played against, some of the best competition in the country at modern day, which has, a lot of really young wide receivers for this next season. But he's definitely like, a leader in the wide receiver room there. Like you said, he's kind of working back from injury right now. But I think that, if you can play at modern day and make a name for yourself, I mean, you're certainly not going to be shying away from competition going against the likes of Tyser Denmark, Jordan Anderson, Dylan Gresham. So maybe not the most, it's not a star-studded commitment. He's rated a 3-star on the 247 Sports Composite, 0.8558, ranked the 1,090th player in the country, number 138 wide receiver, number 81 player in California. But those were kind of just some of my thoughts on Ressler. I think it's a better addition than some people are maybe giving it credit for.
Yeah, and I think also at the wide receiver core that Oregon's playing more of like a numbers game. They're not really playing. I can't remember if it was you that said this earlier today in a tweet or somebody else that I saw say it. But I mean, looking at who they're still also going to be after, you said James Madison already. You're looking at a few other guys still too. I can't. Of course, I'm blanking right now. But they're still looking at several players. They're not just looking. Jeremiah McClellan, that's a big one as well.
Pelham too.
Pelham, yeah. So it's not just that they're going to settle with these 4 guys, right? They're still looking to add, because I think after next season they'll be down 6 wide receivers that are on the roster right now, something like that, 5 or 6, and obviously you have to replace those guys. And I'm sure you'll bring in more obviously next cycle, but getting a good start on that right now, bringing in the guys that you want, getting your guys. There's Bear as well, Gatlin Bear, but he won't be a freshman, I believe, till 2026 because of his mission trip. But they continue to recruit a bunch of guys. I'm thinking, I don't know who else, but yeah, Bear for sure, McClellan. There's one from Florida that I'm thinking about.
Just James Madison, probably, unless there's somebody else.
No, there's somebody else, but I think he's.
Oh, Nick Marsh is another one. He just put Oregon in his top schools. I think he's going to be visiting.
Interesting.
I didn't cut you off if you were finished at that point.
No, you're good. You're good. But I mean, it's just going to be big for Oregon to kind of continue, I guess, adding some more players, right? And they also need to get a bigger body. They already have. I know you mentioned this. They don't have a lot of big bodies in this class right now, wide receiver. They already got that, though, last class and the past 2 classes, I guess. You saw Casper, right? You saw also you saw like Jerion Dickey, of course, the headliner of the class, and a few others as well. Do you want to take over about that Bussy comment there?
Yeah. We can talk a little bit more about that. He's one of the guys that I said that they're still in the mix for. Yeah, so as now that Ressler's in the fold, I think that that was the title of my story earlier today, Colin, is that Oregon's it's a numbers game now at wide receiver in the 2024 class because you're filling up on space, and Ryan Pelham out of Long Beach Millikan. He's right up the road from me. I've been able to see him play a lot, and that's a special dude. He's a special talent, and I think it's really him and Jeremiah McClellan out of St. Louis, Missouri, Christian Brothers. Those are the two guys that I think Oregon is in the best spot for, and really putting the most stock into right now when it comes to recruiting. Junior Adams went to stop by the Long Beach Millikan Showcase this spring, which is obviously good to show up for Pelham, and then also made it on the road out to Missouri. And then Pelham's a former teammate of Jordan Anderson. He was at Long Beach Millikan before he transferred to Newport Harbor ahead of this season. So I think that those are two of the main guys that you're looking at. And then I also mentioned there was a comment for Gatlin Bear out of Burley, Idaho. He has Oregon in his top 5, along with Nebraska, Michigan, Boise State, TCU. He just took his OV to TCU. So there's still a lot of guys that they're really involved in. They're just trying to get as many talented guys as they can. But at the same time, you gotta be cognizant and aware of the roster that you have. And then like you talked about, how you're probably going to lose guys like Troy Franklin after this next season. And maybe Tez Johnson or Trayshawn Holden. I can't remember how much eligibility they have left, but these are some of the guys that they're still looking at. And Pelham's uncle, I think it was Don Pelham, coached linebackers at Oregon for 20 years. So he's obviously, Pelham is very familiar with the Oregon program. He has a top 10, I think, that has programs across the country. But as far as I know, the last I heard, he's taken OVs to USC and Oregon. So I think that's probably going to become an Oregon versus SC battle, and SC already has Xavier Jordan in the fold in 2024. There were a couple other guys that I wanted to hit on real quick. I didn't want to take too much of the spotlight, Colin, but just we have all the names out there. Let's see. Andrew was saying, what about the Bussey kid? Was his question. That's Terry Bussey out of the state of Texas, #1 athlete in the state of Texas, primarily plays wide receiver, can also go at running back a little bit, has Oregon in his top 11. I was hearing that he's going to be taking some visits and making a trip out to Oregon in the summer. So he's still a guy to watch for. They're gonna take their swings for the best players that they can. And then you also have Nick Marsh out of River Rouge. Michigan. He is a former Michigan State commit, and he just placed Oregon in his top schools and has a commitment date set for July 7th. I'm also told that he's supposed to get out on campus. So there's still so many guys that they're involved in. I don't really think that they're much of a player for James Madison. It looks like he's probably going to end up going back home to the state of Missouri, where he's originally from, playing at St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale right now. But I mean, just all the buzz on social media from his end is Mizzou. So that leads me to believe that he's probably going to end up at Missouri right now. But that's kind of the crop of receivers that Oregon is still working on right now.
And so, I mean, you continue to look at all these battles, right? Now I'm going to mention Jeremiah McClellan. You look at LSU, look at Ohio State, Oregon, all in it there, as well as I believe Missouri's in it there as well, because he is from Missouri. Which is another connection there, because obviously Lanning is from Mizzou. So that's something also to watch. You already mentioned Pelham. You already mentioned Bear as well. There was who am I thinking of? But anyway, McClellan just recently visited LSU, and before that had visited Ohio State. I believe he has another visit to Ohio State coming somewhat soon, and he's also supposed to visit Oregon in I believe it's coming weeks. Yeah. McClellan? Yeah.
Yeah, McClellan and Pelham are supposed to both take their officials this month. So and then they both visited this spring, I want to say, with McClellan being there for the spring game. So yeah. We got McClellan's highlights right now, but we can talk about whoever.
I'm trying to. I keep forgetting. There's somebody that I'm thinking of at wide receiver that
I didn't mention.
Hold on. I'm completely blanking right now.
Now you're
'Cause
chilling.
you already said Nick Marsh. You already said, obviously, well, Wingo we're
I
not really
mean,
in it
Wingo is,
for.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
like trying, but I think he's kind of a long shot.
not in it for Freddie DeBose anymore. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just not thinking straight. I thought there was somebody else. I guess not. But I mean, still some elite targets that Oregon's going after. A lot of talent. Hopefully, he can get I mean, would be great if he could get a 5 right in the at wide receiver. That would be a fantastic offensive haul. 2 QBs, 5 wide receivers, potentially 3 tight ends. That'd just be crazy. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot else on the rest of these wide receivers, Max.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and I think that I wrote it a little bit, and maybe we can talk about it a bit. I don't see Oregon going more than 5 wide receivers, in the 2024 recruiting class, especially when you kind of factor in that there's still going to be more talented guys that they want to go after in the transfer portal. I think that a perfect example of that is, Zachary Franklin, who ended up at Ole Miss. Like, I think that they were so involved with Gary Bryant at that point that the numbers just weren't going to work out with that one. But I think Pelham and McClellan are the 2 guys, the main guys to watch, the most realistic for Oregon right now. I think that's something that maybe gets lost sometimes is, you want to get all these top tier guys. But, sometimes you just can't do it, but we know that one visit can change things. So that's really all you need to really ultimately become, competitors or contenders in a recruitment. But I love the haul that they have right now. After getting Ressler in there as a solid glue guy and as another addition that I like. But with McClellan and Pelham coming for their OVs, that's great. And then you have some other guys that are maybe going to make it out on unofficial visits, like Bussy. I don't think that I know the timeline for him as far as his commitment and when he wants to do that, but I think they're shaping up to have another really good haul. And then again, it's worth mentioning, we were just talking about it with Alik Terry, but depending on when these guys want to make their decisions, I'm pretty sure that Pelham wants to decide, by the time the season starts. I'm not as sure about McClellan, but you're looking at maybe having this haul pretty much possibly wrapped up by the time the season comes around, Colin. And that's where you want to be. I mean, you can't ask for more than that, because then you can really go for those top flight guys that want to drag it out and then get going on 25, which they already have with a pair of commits.
Yeah, and in addition to that, also like focusing on keeping your guys, because obviously the flip season, at the end of the year, that's real. I mean, uh, continuing to make sure you can hold on to your guys is something that Oregon struggled somewhat, I'd say, to do in the last cycle, and that was losing 1 offensive guy and 1 defensive guy, with Presley going to UW and then obviously Dante Moore to UCLA. But they did well in flipping guys late in the cycle as well. So I think if they have a player that is wanting to go elsewhere late in the cycle, they're going to find a replacement. So I'm not entirely worried about that, but also getting a big start on 2025 would be huge. Got to get out there early. They weren't really completely able to focus on the 2024 class from last cycle because they had a bunch of guys dragging it out late. I think of Pleasant, Nicholas Harbor, and a few other guys, right, that were kind of dragging it out. So they weren't quite able to focus early on, but it seems like it's worked out pretty fun. I mean, pretty good so far.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we got a couple questions here. How about we hit these questions and then we wrap it up, Colin? Does that sound cool with you?
Yep.
These last 2. This one comes from Micah Time, frequent listener, frequent viewer of the program. So appreciate you tuning in again. Question is update on running back targets. Yeah, this is obviously a really important position for Oregon when you kind of just tackle it with the idea that Bucky Irvin and Noah Whittington could both very well be off to the NFL next year. I think that Bucky obviously gets more of that consideration because he is kind of the number 1 guy for Oregon. But Whittington got a lot of usage as well, and they really didn't have that much different of numbers. But you got to consider that and then think, maybe Oregon goes 1 or 2 backs. I guess on paper it looks like 1 is what they have the room for, but you're going after Nate Frazier at a modern day as well. Again, just talking about how talent rich modern day is, just, same story, different year, different day, whatever you want to say. He is supposed to be taking his official visit to Oregon this upcoming weekend. So that's a very big update that Nate Frazier is going to be coming out for his official visit. Has never really had a very concrete timeline, but I think he's also going to be taking an official visit out to Alabama. He was just at Georgia over the weekend for an unofficial visit. And then you have guys like Dejon Riggs, Jason Brown Jr. Both of those guys were recently in Eugene. And then you also have Christian Clark, who is recently in Eugene. Actually, I think Riggs is coming this weekend.
Yeah.
My bad, I got that mixed up. And then Christian Clark out of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Mountain Point. He was just on campus for his OV. So not really too many tangible updates there right now, other than Frazier coming in for his OV this weekend. That's huge, but it seems like Georgia and Bama again are some of the main competitors there for him, and he's probably my favorite running back target in this class for Oregon.
Yeah, and I don't really have anybody else to add on to that list, Max, but I think that Nate Frazier's the very clear number one, I'd say, but I wouldn't really be shocked if they took Christian Clark if he was ready to make his commitment. I'm sorry, I keep looking down. My dog's like freaking out. Yeah, I wouldn't really be shocked there. There's a few other guys I could see them maybe getting in on, but I won't really get into that right now just because it's not really concrete. It's just like Oregon has their main targets ready. They have the guys that they want, that they're looking at, rather. Jason Brown Jr. is still up there, like you said. And yeah, Christian Clark, Nate Frazier, Jason Brown Jr., I think that was top three. But then Riggs definitely there. I wonder a little bit, I think they've kind of fallen off a little bit for Cameron Jones out of St. Francis Academy as well. Or I believe that's...
You mean Bosco?
Yeah. There's one from St. Francis as well. I'm forgetting his name. I'm completely blanking. But I don't think they're really priorities right now. And that's not to say that they're bad. That's just that I don't think that Oregon's prioritizing them.
Yeah, no, I don't think they are. So we got a good little feel for that. So nothing super tangible right now, Micah. But you gotta, those guys that you still gotta watch, and then we'll see if Oregon can maybe try to seal the deal with Nate Frazier. This weekend, that'd probably be a dream scenario for them to just wrap it up and maybe not even take the Alabama OV. That would be an ideal scenario. But last question that we have for today is from Kevin G. Kevin asks, where does Oregon sit with both the Williams boys, both the linebackers? I feel like those are huge needs for Oregon, especially Justin. Haven't heard as much Oregon hype lately. Visit scheduled. So not sure if you were here a little bit earlier, Kevin, but we were talking about Justin Williams and just how important he is for the Ducks. He's going to be taking his official visit this weekend, so that's really big. And then Dylan Williams, he just took his official visit to Oregon this past weekend, and it feels like everybody's going after him. Michigan State, UCLA, Miami, Texas, Michigan. He's going to be making the rounds for sure. I think Justin Williams is a bigger priority right now just because of the caliber of player that he is, but Dylan Williams is a really good player as well. So I think that Oregon's dream linebacker haul will be Justin Williams, Dylan Williams, Kamar Matudi, maybe even throw in Braden Platt if they have the room for it. But I think that that's a very realistic scenario for them. For me, the gut feel is that Braden Platt's faded a little bit, or they've faded for him, whatever it might be. But that's kind of my thoughts on Justin and Dylan Williams. What are you kind of thinking about the backers, and maybe a little bit on Dylan, Collin?
For Dylan, I mean, he's been having major interest in Oregon for the longest time. I mean, he's teased I'd say teased a commitment. I don't know. He's been, it felt like close to committing several times, and he just hasn't. Sorry, my dog is like freaking out right under my desk. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I mean, Dylan is a very, very good player. I'm not going to say he's on par with Justin Williams, but of course, both of these Williams guys, obviously not related, but both very, very good, and would be major to add to this group. You also think about, how much he's visited Michigan State. I think he's kind of 50-50. I'm sure that after this weekend that it's swayed a little bit in Oregon's favor. If he goes back to Michigan State, it might tip back in towards the 50-50 again. It's really tough to say definitively right now that Dylan Williams is for sure Oregon, right? There's a lot of teams in the running for him, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if in the end he ends up at Oregon. Um, I think he plays earlier. There he gets more playing time early on at Michigan State if he goes there, but I think Oregon, long term, he would be like a major player. And then Justin Williams, we talked about that. Already visited Georgia, right? Yeah. No.
I think he's visiting that 23rd weekend.
Okay. But visiting Oregon this weekend, which is huge, along with like Elijah Rushing and a few other guys, which would be huge because obviously those are two of the top targets, if not the biggest targets remaining in the class. And just getting those guys leaning towards Oregon, that would be huge because they obviously recruits talk, right? If their experience is really good, they're going to voice that. They're going to make sure that they continue to, I guess, network in a sense to other recruits and say, hey, how are you feeling about Oregon? But I mean, the visit obviously this weekend's going to prove to be huge. It's just tough that Georgia gets the next visit the following weekend.
Yeah, so I mean, they would love to have him for that big June 23rd weekend, but I mean, it's definitely not at that level. But this upcoming June 16th weekend is looking like it's going to be pretty big for Oregon. You got Rushing, you got Nate Frazier, Moga, quarterback guy is kind of a face of the class type of dude. He's going to be on campus as well. So those are still some very significant names. And there's even more to that. I'm kind of getting back in the swing of things after I got back from my trip. So it's pretty big, but I mean, Collin, we're already approaching an hour here after I thought it was going to be 30 or 45 minutes. So I think we're definitely going to wind down, but just any last thoughts from you? I sure hope we'll be able to get you back on pretty soon.
I don't really have anything to add on. I mean, it's just we got a lot of big recruiting weekends coming up, right? A lot of visitors coming in. Be something to watch. I apparently need to go walk my dog.
Yeah, definitely get your dog on a walk. Just also wanted to see where can people find more of you and your work before we get out of here.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at InsiderDucks and on Instagram at ducks.insider as the name tag shows on the screen. And thank you again, Max.
Yeah, man, no worries. So yeah, guys, make sure you go tap in with Collin on all the platforms, Twitter and Instagram, and then hopefully we'll see some more writing from him over on Ducks Digest. But if you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at mtorresports, that name right there on your screen. And then you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres, and then make sure to hit that like button and that bell button so that you don't miss out on future streams and videos, posts, podcasts, all that good stuff. And share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. But until next time, appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to tune in, talk some Duck football with us, talk some Cruton. Thanks to Collin for coming on, and we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.